Imagine the horror. Just a moment. The clear sky, the reassuring hum of the engines, and the promise of a destination. Then the silence is shattered. A deafening roar tears the air apart, and hell breaks loose at 10,000 meters above sea level. Once upon a time, or perhaps for Vesna Vulovic, there was a flight like many others on January 26, 1972, a cold day full of promises and routine. She, a flight attendant for JT Airways, the Yugoslavian national airline, was there, her welcoming voice reassuring the passengers aboard the DC 9. A kind smile, impeccable service, the normality of air travel. Who could have imagined that that flight, departing from Stockholm and bound for Belgrade with stops in Copenhagen and Zagreb, would become an indelible scar in the history of aviation and an unprecedented chapter in human resilience? It was a scheduled flight, one of those that millions of people take every day, without a shadow, without a premonition. Yet, just as the plane had climbed to an altitude of almost 11,000 meters flying over Czechoslovakia, the illusion of serenity was shattered. That apparent tranquility, like thin glass, shattered into a million shards of terror. Then terror. In the blink of an eye, the plane was torn apart by a violent explosion. It wasn't a mechanical failure, it wasn't human error. No, the sky suddenly transformed into a battlefield at the hands of an act of mad violence. A bomb. A suitcase packed with explosives placed in the hold transformed that peaceful aircraft into a death trap, a free falling wreck. There was no time to understand, to react, to scream. The plane disintegrated in a split second, its fragments scattered across the winter sky. 28 people on board, passengers and crew, were torn from life in that brutal instant, plummeting to an inescapable fate, their bodies and the debris of the plane scattered across a wide area of Czechoslovakia. The toll was tragic, hope non existent. But amidst the twisted metal and the roar of the wind, amidst the deafening silence of the disaster and the snow that was beginning to cover the horror, a miracle was about to unfold, a story so incredible that it defied every law of physics and all human logic. A glimmer of life, a breath in a world that had just exploded. The world is speeding by, a whirlwind of fear and despair. 10,000 meters down the height of a cruising flight, the summit of Mount Everest, the distance separating life from death in an instant, for Vesna Vulovic transformed into the dizzying prospect of free fall. After the explosion that tore the DC 9 apart, she was thrown from the fuselage, thrown into the void like a twig. It was just a small piece of a giant puzzle of debris, a single soul in a vortex of torn metal and helpless bodies. His mind probably didn't even register the horror. His body, helpless, fell. It wasn't a movie, it wasn't a dream, it was a brutal, cold, merciless reality. The freezing wind lashed her face with the violence of 1,000 whips. The thin air at that altitude took her breath away, but perhaps her recklessness was her salvation. 10 kilometers of falling, a solitary and terrifying journey towards the earth at an unimaginable speed, in a deafening silence interrupted only by the hiss of the wind and perhaps the now slowed beating of his heart. The world beneath her was a blur approaching at terrifying speed, a tragic scene preparing to greet her. Everything was over, all hope was gone, every natural law screamed that death was inevitable, an inescapable fate. There was no escape, no way out. It was the end, the logical conclusion of such a catastrophic event. But fate sometimes holds surprises, and sometimes logic bows before the inexplicable. As the wreckage of the plane scattered across a large wooded, snow covered area of the mountains of Czechoslovakia, among dense trees and deep snow, there was an impact, not that of twisted sheet metal, not that of smashed suitcases, but that of a human body. And that impact, in a way that scientists and aviation experts still struggle to explain, was not fatal. Vesna Vulovic survived. Her body, incredibly, crashed onto a slope covered in fresh, thick snow. The snow, a soft and merciful blanket, acted like a giant cushion, partially cushioning the impact of an event that should have been its end. It wasn't just the snow, though. Fate had woven an even more complex and surprising plot. The violence of the crash, however, was devastating for Vesna. His bones were broken, his body tortured, but in the midst of that disaster, a thread of life, tenacious and indomitable, resisted. His incredible fortune, if you can call it that, was not over yet. When the first responders, a group of volunteers from the village of Sherbska Kamenice, arrived at the crash site, the scene was heartbreaking. Debris, bloody snow, the deathly silence broken only by the wind and the calls of rescuers.
Keep quiet, please.
And then, the discovery. Among the wreckage of the plane, almost hidden, wedged between the snow and a section of the plane's tail, was Vesna. She lay lifeless, an angel fallen from heaven, her beauty obscured by her wounds and the cold. It was a local lumberjack, Bruno Honka, a man who had served as a medic during World War II, who found her. His experience and his trained eye for the signs of life made the difference. Vesna was conscious, though barely, and was muttering. His body, in a further inexplicable twist of fate, had become trapped, almost enveloped by one of the plane's service trolleys. This landing gear, or perhaps a part of the fuselage, protected her, in a sense, like a misshapen but saving cage, preventing her from being thrown away and dispersing some of the impact force. At that moment, Honke understood. "He's still alive!" he shouted. The revelation, incredulous, resounded in the cold silence of the mountains. In a field of death there was life. In an unprecedented disaster, a miracle had dared to defy the impossible. A relentless fight for survival had just begun, but this time Vesna was not alone. Rushed to the hospital, doctors were faced with a puzzle of injuries so serious they seemed incompatible with life. Skull fractures, both legs broken, 3 broken vertebrae, one of which was crushed, causing temporary paralysis from the waist down, a fractured pelvis, several broken ribs, and internal bleeding. His condition was critical, the prognosis uncertain, his body a mosaic of pain and devastation. It was a miracle she was alive, but her battle was far from over. The first few days were agony. He lapsed into a coma, fighting for his life in a limbo between wakefulness and oblivion. For 27 days out, the outside world moved on without her, as her body struggled to repair the unimaginable. His injuries were so severe that it seemed impossible to survive, let alone regain some semblance of normalcy. The doctors worked tirelessly, with a care and dedication that went beyond mere professional duty. It was an unprecedented case, a challenge to medicine itself. And then, after almost a month, Vesna woke up. With no memory of the incident, a merciful void had shielded her mind from the horror. The first memory that resurfaced was the request for a glass of water, a small but significant sign of a return to life. His rehabilitation journey was long, exhausting, and painful. For months he faced intensive care, surgeries, and relentless physiotherapy. He had to learn to walk again, to coordinate his movements, to trust his body. The spinal fracture had temporarily paralyzed her, but with a willpower that welled up from the depths of her soul, she refused to give up. Every small step forward was a victory, every step, however uncertain, a triumph. Vesna was not just a patient, she was a symbol, living proof of human resilience, of the ability to fight even when all seems lost. He faced the physical pain and deep anguish of those who have survived a disaster carrying the weight of that cursed day. But in her, the flame of life burned with an unheard of intensity. Despite the indelible scars, both physical and emotional, Vesna Vulovic did not give in to despair. She emerged from the darkness not only as a living miracle, but as a woman who found a new purpose in life. Against all medical expectations, she was able to walk again, living an almost normal life, albeit with the limitations imposed by her injuries. Even though her injuries left her partially disabled, Vesna never stopped fighting. She continued to work for Jet Airways, first in an office role and then as a spokesperson, traveling around the world to share her story and inspire millions. His legacy extends far beyond the record for surviving the highest freefall without a parachute, a record recognized by Guinness World Records. His story is a powerful warning about the value of life, the fragility of existence, and at the same time the incredible strength of the human spirit. It teaches us that even in the face of the abyss of despair, there can be a glimmer of hope. His experience is a hymn to resilience, to the ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles, to get up after falling even from 10,000 meters. Vesna Vulovic has returned to flying no longer physically among the clouds, but on the wings of a universal message of courage and perseverance. His life, after that tragic day, became a beacon, a moving example of how even the greatest of disasters can, incredibly, reveal the inexhaustible strength that lies within us. Every beat of his heart, every step he took, every word he spoke was a tribute to life, a steadfast refusal to be defined by tragedy. And so, the angel fallen from heaven taught the world to believe in the impossible, to never lose hope, and to fight for every single breath. If this incredible story touched you, don't miss our next video.